Good morning. Thanks for joining. This is the first time we've used this particular platform, so I'm glad I just saw someone say morning there, so you can all hear me. Thank you all for joining us for this first ever virtual Women in Content. This was an event that we put on last year in the physical, in the real world, which seems like a really, really distant memory right now for all of us, I'm sure. It was such a great event. We had 5 speakers last year as well, 5 great speakers. And this year our plan was to put this on again in the real world, but of course with things the way they are, it hasn't panned out like that. So I'm glad you're all able to join us on this virtual Women in Content, and it means that I've seen a lot of people as well sign up from all over the world. So truly is brilliant that we can have a global audience for this. We've got 5 brilliant speakers. Nicola should be waiting in the wings. So I'm going to try and summon Nicola from the wings, and hopefully I'll be able to see her soon. There we go. I'm glad that worked. I was going to start trying to do the dove call, you know. Great to see you. Morning, Nicola. How are you?
Morning, everyone.
I've gone through the rules, so I'm still expecting to see some questions pop up in the chat box, and I'm going to have to quickly write it down.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Wednesday morning. So as Rob said, I'm going to be talking today about the future of content marketing. I think, it's very topical at the minute because it's probably one of the only times ever that really the whole world is almost on pause in terms of life as we know it, really. So hence why I've called it the Great Reset, because I think, there's going to inevitably be some changes at the end of this. And yeah, for us in content marketing, what does that mean? What type of things do we need to consider? What do we need to look out for? And just obviously going back to the idea this is a Women in Content event. I mean, something I've been in this industry now for about 20 years. And it's, in my first 10 years, I was in a very male dominated world. Every meeting I went to, it was always guys. And so something in the last 10 years, particularly with our group, I've been, really, really trying to, bring women to the forefront of our business, instill confidence in them, get them involved in speaking events. I speak at a lot of events, and I know when I speak to the organisers, it's always guys who put themselves forward, and they really struggle a lot of the time to get a lot of women to speak. So, I think it's really important that as women, we put ourselves out there, and we challenge ourselves with the guys at these events. So yeah, so basically the future of content marketing. So I run something called the Maze Group with about 6 agencies. We deal in all different things around marketing, from content marketing, film studio, influencer marketing, etc. So everything we do is around campaigns. So yeah, we'll talk about what's happened in life at the moment. As you all know, it's a crazy time. I hope everyone's doing okay. There's been this unprecedented change in our lifestyle. I imagine for many of you, work has been paused or cancelled. We've had to look at our businesses, adapt our strategies. Sadly, we've got certain clients in retail and industries that have been really affected, where, we've had to pause campaigns. Other industries, finance, agriculture, are still going strong, but we've had to adapt our strategies and the content work we're doing with them. But in terms of our lifestyle currently, I think if you look at everything, we're at home every day, so we have fewer problems. Yes, we have to pay our mortgage, etc. But we've got less choice in what we do, less choice in what we buy, less things we can do. Most of us are probably having more time with our family, in our immediate family, and we've got a lot more time to think, because we just don't have as the choices we have normally. So I've been saying this to a lot of our team, really. I think currently survival is the new success. I think, everyone's having to reevaluate their work, their content campaigns, their strategies, redefine it according to what's going on, or budget cuts, etc. So yeah, it's a strange time for everyone. And what's even more difficult, I think, is the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty. No one really knows when life is going to go back to normal, whatever normal may look like. There was an interesting stat that came out yesterday from YouGov, and it said only 9% of people actually want life to go back to how it was before, normal life, however that was. So I think that's interesting. So there's definitely going to be changes. The economists are saying, yes, we will recover, but it's going to be very gradual. Sadly, there's predictions that a third of businesses are going to go out of business. So there's going to be higher unemployment and fewer businesses around. So it's going to be a different world. And something for us as marketeers, it's going to be definitely going to be challenging, because businesses are tightening their belts, budgets are being cut. And one of my pet hates, and I speak about this regularly, is businesses who view marketing as a commodity. For me, marketing adds value. Marketing is where the value is derived. You can have a great product, but if you don't market it well, it means nothing. But so many businesses now over the last few years are run by people in finance, or people who look at marketing as a commodity and something that they can just chop in times of hardship. So I think our job as marketeers, particularly with the businesses we work with new businesses we're seeking to work with, I think we need to, really prove the value of marketing, and we need to, regain a share of and carve a new chunk of creativity, and proving that marketing adds value post COVID. So how does that lead into the development of our marketing, content marketing strategies? So I think we need to look at how the world will look when all this is over. There's going to be, will our motivations be different? Will our needs be different? Will our desires be different? Will there be different pain points to trigger to find out, what we start looking for in a solution? So I think we need to think about the human and how the human insight after all of this. And it's going to be an interesting time. So I've put a few questions here I think we all need to think about when we're talking about our content strategies, our content campaigns. Will people's buying habits change? I think, I'm guilty of it. I'm terrible for online shopping and buying all sorts of things. And actually, when you're confined to four walls, you realise you don't perhaps need as many things as you thought you did. What will people realise they can live without? Again, this time's given us lots of time to think about things. Where will we want to redistribute our money? Are we going to be more interested in, different things? Because have our social attitudes changed? I think something to think about is ethics. We've seen a lot of companies who perhaps haven't been ethical over this time, Sports Direct, for example, and they've faced a lot of backlash, reputation damage. Will that affect us generally, how we think about things? Will content be consumed differently? A big thing we all need to think about really is, we put together our strategies and we look at platforms, we look at where our audiences are going to be consuming it. But will this period mean actually we do consume content differently? And an interesting thing to think about, which I'll go on to in a bit, is which industries, are there going to be more opportunities for content marketing? Are there different industries we can reach out to? So I think something you'll all be very au fait with is, over this period, is the online revolution. I think we're all much more comfortable with technology, shopping online, gaming, everyone's on Zoom and on the group chats every day. And I think, it's something like my mum, for example, has never really been comfortable with tech, but now she's online banking, she's on Zoom, she's on WhatsApp, and these are things she's would never have dreamed of doing before. So I think there's a whole generation who are going to be much more comfortable with online, which means, brands will be able to deliver live content more confidently because audiences are going to be more confident with using it. So it's definitely something to consider. And, a big thing for us is, will events survive? Because web potentially will become the new normal. I think something we've seen over the last couple of weeks is lots of brands are actually going online to launch events, whereas normally they would have spent loads of money on a big external event. So OnePlus, for example, did their unboxing in augmented reality. They managed to get a much larger audience than they would have been ordinarily in a shop. iPhone 2 have just delivered their new thing online. And for example, I don't know if anyone saw Travis Scott the other day did a brilliant launch of his new single online on the gaming platform on Fortnite, and he had over 30 million people watching. So there's all these new opportunities for content on platforms that perhaps ordinarily would have been ignored or been launched at a live event. So when we talk about industries that we could potentially target, I think, when you think about events, I imagine a lot of us primarily work in B2C, but I think there's going to be a massive opportunity in B2B because, you know, traditionally they go to big events, they spend lots of money on swanky venues, lots of travel, but the reality is handshaking and those face-to-face interactions are going to be potentially limited for quite a long time. So this means potential new audiences, new content opportunities. They're going to have to create content. They're going to have to talk to audiences. So just something to think about is there's potential opportunities there. And in terms of actually where we plan our strategies and where we place our content, you know, we talked about the online revolution. And I think these platforms like Zoom, Hangouts, Skype, it's going to be so many opportunities because they are adding more and more features, more bells and whistles every day, you know, live polls, managed Q&As, breakout rooms. There's going to be opportunities. It's worth keeping abreast with what's happening with these platforms. More will also spring up. So it's good things to consider. And also things like non-platforms, Cast and Netflix, you know, the creative possibilities on these, which are with watch parties, sharing experience, interacting with content. You know, I think there's really good opportunities there to repackage content, you know, come up with new ideas. So things to think about. Something that's going to happen the other side of whenever this ends is, you know, we are going to have a massive appreciation for real life experiences, you know, things where people are going to want adventures, they were going to want to go out, life is going to feel much shorter. So I think we need to consider, again, the human side of when we're writing our content, what's going to matter to people. As I said, human interactions, you know, tangible objects are going to feel luxurious. What we've seen is loads of people, there's a massive enterprise happening at the moment. People are taking up their hobbies, people are creating more, people are selling more. So post-COVID, there's going to be a lot of interest in real, authentic, community-minded things, you know, musicians, news, everyone's doing things from home. So I think, you know, real life performances at home are happening. We're seeing musicians broadcast their events. We're seeing, you know, the news being broadcast from newsreaders' homes, CBeebies. My little 16-month-old son, you know, we're watching CBeebies and the presenters are doing it from home. We're seeing real people in real environments. So I think something to this authenticity is, you know, brands are going to need to show their human side because we're going to be much more used to it. And I think actually almost this idea of everything being so perfect and so beautiful and loads of money spent on it might seem a little bit fake. So this comes into like value versus budget. And I think, you know, a lot of times to have a good story to tell, you don't always need loads of budget. You don't need loads of production. You don't need loads of window dressing. And as I said at the start, I think where we can be clever as marketeers is we're creating the value for the product, for the service, for, you know, whoever our client is. And again, time is going to become our currency. And, you know, I think we're going to value time more than money. You know, again, we don't necessarily have to spend loads of budget to create value, and people are going to really appreciate substance over style. You know, people are going to know what they do and how they spend their time is going to be really valuable. So this leads to looking at, you know, clients we're working with, the purpose. I think over the past, you know, year or so, you've seen the younger generation really, you know, really look at purposeful brands. But I think this time has made us think more, and I think that idea of purpose is going to move from the youth to the wider demographics. So when we're thinking about our campaigns, we need to think about that deeper purpose of, you know, what our clients, why they exist, what they're doing. And another thing, you know, we talk about this post-COVID enterprise. People have been focusing on their hobbies. There's going to be a lot more niches. Will people turn their hobbies into careers, or they decide they hate what they're doing? You know, this will potentially lead to an abundance of new content creators, writers, artists, photographers, vloggers, etc. So it's going to be really interesting to see these new content creators, these new bigger audiences in these niches. It's going to be opportunities for us to target our content campaigns at. You know, my friend, for example, his wife sells craft kit boxes, and she's seen a 900% increase each week on her sales. And it shows you it's like Christmas every week, and it's just unbelievable. But this is obviously going to lead to a lot of competition if there's more niches, more competitors out there. So we have to consider that. And I think something we've seen with Amazon, for example, they've sold out of podcasting equipment because everyone's thinking, brilliant, we want to start our own podcast. Something I've added in here is influencers. You know, we have an influencer marketing agency. We do a lot of content campaigns around that. And again, I think we've seen, you know, we talk about celebrities, talk about influencers. We've seen some real failings with like the Imagine, Gail Godot, and you know, people taking this period and doing content badly. And also we've seen, you know, the fakeness of some influencers. So I think when we work with them, we need to look at the genuine ones. They need to be relatable, and it needs to be real. So my background is psychology, and I'm really interested in kind of the psychology of marketing. So something I put in here, I won't go into it in too much detail, but, you know, something that I saw a massive trend towards before this all happened, you know, particularly as content marketers, so many people were focused on the insights of data to feed into their content strategies. And don't get me wrong, data is really, really important, but I felt like content marketing, people were trying to make it more of a science, and everything was being run insights from data, and decisions were being made through all of the data, and everything was, you know, data makes someone an average, and we were looking at personas. I think something, you know, this period has taught is it's the human insight. We're going to come out the other side of this, and there's going to be a really need to look at actual human behavior. And so this model here is something by a Japanese guy called Kanu, and it's a model around, you know, when we think about our campaigns, and what we need to look at as marketeers is excitement attributes, you know. And I think we need to look at customer understanding, human behavior, and this is looking at things at a conscious and unconscious level. And I won't get too in depth with it, but I think we need to understand when we're thinking of our campaigns, what are the things that are really exciting people? What are the attributes? You know, I'll give an example. So St Pancras Station, you probably all know, in London, when that was built, millions and millions of pounds were spent on it. And so in terms of a station, you know, the architecture is great, it performed really well, it was, you know, there was loads of it, the trains were going to be faster, the space was going to be bigger, it's going to have all these boards telling you about the train time. So there's all these brilliant performance attributes, stats to it. People like those, some people, you know, but if all the content marketing had been round about how this great station, how quicker the trains were going to be, how the architecture is great, it's interesting. But it's actually, in the content marketing, they decided to talk about this champagne bar at the top, the longest in Europe, and all the campaigns were done around, you know, the size of this champagne bar. Something is pretty nondescript really, but it was picked up in all the press, all the content marketing was around it, and it made St Pancras as a station a destination rather than just a station with trains that people go to for a functional reason. It suddenly brought St Pancras to people thought, wow, it's got the longest champagne bar in Europe, it's somewhere we can go and, you know, as a destination. And so people go there now to shop, to have meetings, and all the coverage and all the content marketing was all around, you know, this excitement attribute of the fact that this quirk of this longest champagne bar in Europe. I mean, this is just one example, but I think something to think about when we're planning our campaigns around content marketing is, you know, let's look at human insights, let's look at human emotions, and, you know, emotion generates action. So I think if we think too much about performance and too much about data all the time, yes, we have to measure things, I fully appreciate that, but we also need to have a deeper understanding of human behavior and to give us and our clients a competitive difference and be brave. Something I'm preaching a lot to our teams and our colleagues is, you know, let's think a bit counterintuitive. Everyone's going very rational, everyone's again using the data, but let's think about human behavior in a much more counterintuitive way, much more irrational way, and let's, you know, have some space to be clever and creative with our content marketing. So yeah, that's a guy called Kanu. He's a Japanese guy. I'd read more about it. It's really interesting. Again, I could talk about it for hours, but I think, you know, it's just thinking about real excitement and real things that differentiate our content marketing campaigns as we go forward, thinking about the human insight. So yeah, I think we need to really think we're entering a new world paradigm. Things are going to change. It's inevitable. That in itself leads to lots of opportunity. You know, as I discussed, there's going to be new audiences, new content creators, new businesses who are going to seek content marketing. And there's going to be a change in human behavior. I think, you know, that's, for me, psychology and marketing is, you know, technological innovations have happened for the last few years, but technology can only go so far. We can only speed things up, you know, to a certain degree because of the law of physics. We can only, you know, make things faster, etc. But where I think we've got an opportunity over the next few years is human psychology, innovation with psychology and human behavior. And, you know, read about behavioral science and how we can integrate that into our content marketing strategies. It's fascinating. And I'm happy to, you know, I could talk all day about it. I'm happy to talk more about it if any of you are interested in it. And again, I think something we need to really push with our clients, with new clients, is, you know, marketing is where we add the value. Marketing isn't a commodity. It isn't something that can be stopped and started, because it's something that, you know, however great a product is, if it's not marketed well, no one's going to buy it. And, you know, and I think that's our job as marketeers, is to educate and to create that value with the campaigns we're developing. So thank you. I hope that was useful. Like I said, I've got loads of thoughts on psychology and marketing and how we can integrate that into our campaign. So happy to talk more to anyone. My details are here, my email's there, my website's there, where I've got some of my articles I've written about my experience in business over the years. So thank you, everyone.
So yeah, it's really interesting. I've got a couple of questions for you.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question from Georgie, and this is that she's actually said to all of the speakers. So obviously you're up first. What advice would all of these fantastic women give to a student who isn't studying a degree focused on marketing or content creation on how to get into the industry? Like the easy one.
Well, I mean, we take on a lot of people we hire don't have degrees. I think what you need to show is, you know, people we hire just show they've got a hunger, they've been doing loads of stuff in their own time, whether it's writing, whether it's learning, you know, they've got a real understanding of the industry, they're doing their own side projects. I think, to be honest, if anything, you know, you can have a degree, and if you haven't been doing a lot of that stuff and you don't understand the industry, it means nothing. We'd rather take on people in our group who are hungry, who want to get into the industry, have been testing, have been trying things. I mean, there's so many courses you can learn out there. You can do, you know, Google puts on loads of things you can learn. So yeah, I think it's just whatever she's interested in, just be doing things in her own time to learn and show that she's got that appetite for wanting to learn. And if she can get opportunities for work experience or internships, I mean, that's obviously invaluable as well. It's always that catch-22. People say, well, I haven't got any experience, I can't get the job. But nowadays, you know, you can get experience from groups online, from courses, you know, from just doing a week. We take on a lot of people for 1 week, 2 weeks, just so they can come and get some experience. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities out there.
Excellent. Catherine's asked as well, have you seen a stronger relationship between TV streaming and content, both in driving awareness and extending a story?
I guess people. What do you mean, brands actually using streaming or using TV?
Stronger TV streaming content. Oh, there's a comment as well. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's early days. I think what we need to be, you know, what we're looking at with a lot of our clients is where's the opportunity. So we're looking at streaming, say on Twitch, because we know much more people are going on Twitch at the moment. So we're looking at where can we redefine our content campaigns and redistribute on channels such as these Cast and Twitch, etc., where there's huge audiences. And I think a lot of brands are now looking, what we saw with the Travis Scott, we saw with the augmented reality, brands are looking at all of these platforms, the streaming services, non-platforms, etc., and looking at actually how can we get our brands out there in a new, novel way. And in fact, what I've been listening and speaking to people about is which is interesting, is they're finding they're reaching far more audiences with this online facility than they would ordinarily. So there's definitely going to be a shift, I think, or all these platforms are going to become part of everyone's strategies of how they launch their campaigns. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's just something, you know, we're keeping our eye on every day, and we're looking at, like I said, all of these new features that are being added to these platforms, and they're just going to grow. So yeah, I think it's definitely something we're looking at with all of our clients and our campaigns. We're looking at actually how can we now tell that story in a different way, perhaps on these platforms. And it's fun, you know. I think that's a nice thing, is if you've got clients as well who are we're very lucky with some of our clients. They've got a marketing brain, so they're happy to try things even if they don't necessarily work. And I think that's part of the fun, is we're having fun thinking, right, how can we adapt this campaign to go onto this platform, or, you know, use it in this way.
Excellent. I just want to say as well to everybody that I'm seeing that still people kind of coming in now, and I'm still getting notifications about people signing up. And so don't worry, you haven't missed anything. Well, you have missed it, but you'll see the replay later on. I believe 3 hours after the webinar ends, you'll get a replay of it all, so you can watch it all, and you should have a timestamp for the questions as well, so you can sort of jump ahead and see that as well. I've got a couple more questions for you, Nicola, if you've obviously got the time.
Yeah.
I'm just looking, just checking how we are for time as well. I work in, Jennifer's asked, I work in women's health, and we've seen higher engagement during this time. Do you predict that the health industry, femtech, will still hold people's interest post-COVID?
Femtech. So what do you mean? You've had more people?
Higher engagement, yeah. Higher engagement in the female health industry, the femtech.
Okay. What, on platforms? On what? Engagement with what? Sorry, what's kind of?
I'm wondering if they mean higher engagement with their content during this time.
Okay, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the thing we're discussing at the minute, is obviously everyone has a lot more time in the sense they're working at home. So, you know, as we know, social media engagement has gone up massively. Long form content is being read more. So it's going to be interesting to see if, you know, when restrictions are released, whenever that will be, will suddenly everyone go, right, I've had enough of my screen time, I've had enough of engaging with people, talking to people, reading things. Again, you know, I don't have we just don't know. But I think, yeah, again, I do think people are going to be more savvy with the platforms they're engaging with content with. I think there'll probably be, in the first few weeks, there'd be less engagement around, you know, content on social, content on different platforms, websites, etc. And then it might go up again. Again, it will depend on, you know, the restrictions. But yeah, it's definitely going to be, again, whatever content you're producing and how if you're building that audience. The clever thing to do now is, if you are getting high engagement and you're building an audience, is making sure you're somehow recording that audience. So you're putting pixels on your content, you're making sure that audience is, even when restrictions are lifted, you've still got data from that audience and you can still continue to engage with them. So now is an opportunity, because more eyes are on everything, social, webs, etc. It's just making sure that it's not just a number, you're actually understanding who that audience is and building pixels around, you know, those sites, so you can continue talking to that audience you're building up over this period. That would be my advice really at the moment.
Awesome. Just if I can just get two more questions, Nicola. We've got Jess has asked, do you think we may all suffer? There's a few comments in this, so I'll just run through a few of the comments as well after this question. Okay. Do you think we may all suffer from Zoom fatigue and maybe TikTok overload, meaning we may crave other channels of communication? Should we start planning for this shift? And then a few people have said, then totally agree with you on the Zoom fatigue. It definitely has its uses, but seems like a predominant way of delivering virtual tours. Definitely worth exploring alternative channels, podcasts, etc. Somebody else said TikTok overload for sure. A lot of people agree with that. What would and what would you say?
Well, I think, yeah, we've had this discussion a lot. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I get to the end of the day and I've had God knows how many Zoom meetings and I'm bloody exhausted, you know, and I'm used to, I think I've used to travel a lot. I was on the train a lot. I was flying. I was always on the go. And so something what's been nice is, you know, I feel like my body's quite rested and it's been quite nice. And I've realised I can do a lot of meetings that I was travelling to maybe over Zoom. So yeah, I definitely think we'll all be sick of Zoom by the next however many weeks. But I do think it will slowly start building into our kind of day-to-day planning. You know, I mean, I've got different offices in the country. So for me, I think it's, you know, to save traveling, sometimes it's good to have meetings over Zoom. And again, it depends what functionality it brings to it. If it brings some really cool functions and, you know, new things to it. But yeah, I think there'll be a massive, huge decline in usage, you know, when restrictions are lifted and we can go back into the office again. But I do think it will become part of our everyday kind of usage a lot more than it was prior to COVID. TikTok again. I think still brands are trying to realize how they can get the most out of TikTok from a content marketing strategy. We're using it with some of our clients sort of cautiously at the moment. But yeah, I think, like I said, the authenticity of adventure and human interactions is going to be something we all crave. So getting away from our screens and our laptops is going to be something we all want to do, for a period of time. But I do, things like Zoom are going to open up more opportunities. I didn't really talk about it much in my presentation, but, the reality is we can do business now over Zoom. Yes, we can go meet someone, but we can have more meetings. I don't have to fly to America or fly to wherever all the time for meetings. Yes, face-to-face is really important, but I think it will just become an integrated part of what we're doing, really. And as for TikTok, yeah, I think it's easily find yourself getting obsessed in it for an hour and think, what have I actually done? But yeah, so I think so many people are using TikTok at the minute to fill their time, so there will naturally be a drop off, but it's still going to be huge. It's still growing. It's still, millions and millions of views. As with all, you look at Facebook, you look at all of these social media platforms that came out, it's always the early adopters who were the younger generations. And, TikTok has been used. It was predominantly, under 20s, and then slowly, as it's being exposed on Facebook and on Twitter, you're starting to see the demographics creeping up massively, and it has been for the last year. So probably TikTok, the younger generation will start getting sick of it, and it will start be the older generation doing it. And all these platforms just have this natural cycle with demographics and age, and there'll be something else that comes in its place. We don't know what that is yet, but a new platform will come, which we'll all have to then get our heads around and consider for our campaigns.
Awesome. And I just got one last question. I obviously I know that Rowan I think she should be ready to come on stage soon, so I might have to summon Rowan from the wings as well, like I did with you, Nicola.
Cool.
But it'll be interesting to see. But in the meantime, where is it? All right. Amy has asked, do you recommend any specific books or courses to read and discover further on human behavior psychology and marketing?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a huge fan, slightly obsessed, with Rory Sutherland from Ogilvy, who is just a genius. And he is all about, human behavior psychology. He's got a book called Alchemy, which I highly recommend reading. And it's all about, bringing magic back into our marketing. And, again, I could talk about that for hours, but anything by him, if he's got some great videos on YouTube. There's a few, but there's some really good books on like evolutionary biology, which are really good. I can put a list up. Nassim Taleb, he's a really good guy as well. He's written some great books. So I can get a list and share with anyone. But yeah, anything by Rory Sutherland, anything Alchemy is probably my number one book I can recommend reading. Again, read more about the Carnot model, and yeah, I think like if you look at anything evolutionary biology as well, just understanding the human brain, look about anything about the conscious and subconscious. But yeah, I've got a whole list of like my favorites I can share with anyone. I can put on my LinkedIn. Yeah,
I was going to say, Nick, you've got obviously your LinkedIn details are they should be on the registration page. If not, then obviously anybody's free to do that. Nicola.
But it's fascinating. You'll get lost in a black hole of brilliance when you start reading it all, and it will change the way you think about marketing. Definitely, it's really fascinating.
Excellent.
Well, thank you, everyone. I hope that was interesting, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.
Oh, we got Rowan. Yeah, thanks, Nicola. Thank you so much for that. It was brilliant. Morning, Rowan.
Hello. That's a miracle. I thought I wasn't going to be able to do it.
Oh, you've got a cat with you as well?
I do. I've just given up on that. I just let her come in. So yeah, hello everybody. Hello from Jemima.
I just obviously want to say a massive thank you obviously to Nicola there. Rowan's obviously up next, as you can see. And again, the same format as well. If anybody's got any questions, can you please enter them in the question section below rather than the chat box, because I'll probably miss them in the chat box. For all those people who have just popped in now and the ones who are coming in, don't worry. Obviously, you've missed Nicola's talk, but the replay will be sent out this afternoon, so you'll be able to watch all that back again. So without further ado, then Rowan, if you'd like to share your screen.
So hello everybody, first of all, and thanks Nicola. That talk was really really interesting. I am just going to bring this up now. Okay, no worries. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm kind of taking you down a slightly different path from the path that Nicola went on, and want to have a little bit of fun and talk about a serious issue in a slightly different way. So my talk today is going to be mainly about kind of agency culture and looking at a different type of leadership, just kind of taking inspiration from the women in content topic. So there's a lot of Fleabag in it, essentially. So I am Rowan Morrison. For those who haven't heard me speak before or who haven't heard of me, I am managing director of a brand purpose agency called Rationale, which is based in Edinburgh, as you can probably tell from my accent, but we work with clients in the UK and the USA to support them in defining their narrative and what they stand for and how they communicate that with their audiences. So our proposition is about delivering brand relevance, and we're very focused on the kind of performance aspect of that and actually the measurement of the purpose that you put out there in the world. So today, as I said, I want to talk about women in the ad industry, really, and the fact that we're still in a little bit of a grim place. Also, particularly in leadership. So there's statistics out there that show very clearly that women outnumber men in creative agencies. I think the stat's about 54% women. But only 1% of creative agencies are female founded, which is a very, very small number, and one that's very interesting in a number of ways as to why that actually is. The gender pay gap in creative industries is somehow, despite all the noise about how we approach diversity and inclusion and how agencies are trying very hard to address this gap, it's actually increasing. And it widened 1.1% last year. So again, the divide between the kind of mass of women who work in creative industries compared to leadership is getting worse rather than better. And I think there's a lot of tokenism as well in terms of people viewing putting women into leadership roles as a tick box exercise. Only 3% of creative directors are women, and this is despite around 70% of design students being female. So there's something happening between university graduation and actually getting a senior role in the industry where women are simply disappearing. And okay, there's some positive momentum, but it's slow. So Campaign School Reports, which is really interesting source of kind of statistics on our industry, if you're interested in that kind of thing, shows that 43% of agencies now have women in senior management positions, but that's the definition of that is quite wide. Just as a kind of personal anecdote, Rationale, my agency, just recently we've decided we'd like to take on a non-executive director to support us in our growth. And we were inundated by applications. We got over 100 applications for the non-exec role from extremely impressive individuals, but only 3 out of those 100 were from women. And I found that very depressing, and also wondered why that might be. So is it because there's less experienced women out there who could perform a non-exec role for an agency, or is it because women actually who have that experience don't really value that and don't feel that they're in a position where they feel worthy of passing it on? So it's a bit one to think about. So why is this happening then? So there's a lack of female role models in the industry. When you have, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy really, if you don't have people who are women in leadership positions, then there's nobody to look up to and aspire to and think, well, I can do that too. There's definitely unconscious and probably subconscious bias in hiring practices. People tend to hire people like themselves. And that affects diversity in a whole number of ways. Obviously, we're talking about gender today, but when you get to BME statistics, they are even worse. So there are very, very few Black minority ethnic individuals who are in leadership positions in agencies as well. And obviously, we all know the advertising industry tends to reward traits like bullishness, power playing, people self-promoting, working very long hours, one-upmanship, taking the credit. It's very ego-driven. So, and I think that is starting to change in a lot of ways. Obviously, we're all about purpose at Rationale, and you can see that more kind of stakeholder focus is really coming to the fore now, particularly, as we're all going through this pandemic. But it's definitely still there, and that tends to be, and I don't think that it's exclusively, but it tends to be more, those are more male traits. So how can we make a change? We need a new form of leadership, really. And again, this isn't about, female leadership in particular, but it's a different type of leadership. And again, I just wanted to say another thing about agency culture here. I gave a Women in Content talk live and in person with actual people, I think last year. And at the end, I spoke about similar topics, and at the end, a young woman came up to me and asked me very earnestly when I thought that she should have children so it didn't impact her career. And that was astounding to me, that someone thought that they had to ask me my opinion of when they should have children, because they felt that would hold them back in their career. And that really inspired me to think about the way that we set up our agency. And what's wrong in our business, that's a question that should even be asked. So things that we can do, we need to take a look at agency culture, as I say, and stamp out poor behaviours. There's an interesting statistic that I found from George Washington University that said that men are 33% more likely to interrupt a woman than a man. It's called man-interrupting. So things like that need to be stamped out. And that's not just about leadership. It's not just about top-down culture change. It's about people actually calling that out when they see it at all levels. And I think that form of leadership is the type of leadership that is meaningful. So again, not necessarily coming from women exclusively, but that kind of less hierarchical form of leadership that rewards, a much wider set of traits such as empathy, empowerment, transparency, people collaborating, emotional intelligence. Obviously, women are women who have children benefit from more flexible working hours, but men who have children do too. And that's something that I think particularly agencies struggle with because of the kind of client demand. But it can be done if you're open-minded. You can have flexible working hours, you can have job shares, you can have all these things that really create that much more inclusive environment. And also, this doesn't happen just by saying you want it to happen. You need to be very proactive, and you need to put actual processes and practices in place that are well communicated and that are rewarded meaningfully in order to make a change. And again, I think there's a lot of talk and not a lot of action. So that's all the grim stuff. I now want to kind of talk about, take some inspiration from my favourite TV characters. So this is about kind of, we're all in a lockdown, we're watching a lot of box sets, and taking inspiration, thinking about those role models. So what I've done is kind of taken some quotes from these ladies and kind of tied it into what I feel about female leadership, and also what us all as women, as individuals, can do to kind of put ourselves forward and make a change in an agency culture that will benefit everybody, and also benefit what we do, the creativity and the passion that we have for what we do. So, and I should say, one terrible omission I have to admit to is I prepared this presentation before I started watching Normal People. So I don't know if anyone's watched Normal People yet, but it's probably one of the best TV series I've seen for a very long time. And I would have definitely included Marianne for those who have been watching it and didn't. So yeah, bit of a gap at the moment. But yeah, so here's Fleabag, who I love. And she says, people make mistakes. That's why they put rubbers at the end of pencils. And this, I think, refers to vulnerability. So vulnerability is a good thing. Agencies that I've worked in the past, and I'm sure a lot of people who have dialed into this webinar have had a similar experience, can operate a kind of pervasive blame culture that has everybody on the back foot. They kind of cover their backs. They, want to take credit for the good things, but they want to distance themselves from the bad things. There's definitely ego that comes into play in a lot of advertising agencies. But actually, that is so counterproductive to creativity. Out of mistakes come true creativity. So I think it's on all of us who work in this industry to form agencies where fallibility is celebrated and people feel safe to try new things and to fail. And I think as well, that isn't just about agency culture, it's about client marketing culture as well, because clients need to understand where agencies add value, and it is in that creativity. So they need to give agencies space to fail. And we've all been in a position where, as agency people, where we've tried something creative and the client has struggled with that, and we've felt like, oh, we've stuffed up, and that's bad, and that now puts that account at risk. And that is so narrow and so counterproductive to doing great work. So clients should understand, if they are bringing in an agency, that they, it's their job almost to be the editor. So they let the agencies go to the very outer ends of where they're comfortable, and then they can draw them back a bit, but that's where they add value. And that means sometimes they'll get it wrong, and that's okay. And there's so many rich learnings that can come from that. So vulnerability is good. This is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So she says, even if you see them coming, you're not ready for the big moments. It's what you do afterwards that counts. That's when you find out who you are. So obviously vulnerability is important, making mistakes is important, but it's also okay for women to celebrate their success and put themselves forward. Just sharing a personal story, because I think that's important in this context. I haven't always been a managing director. I entered this industry as a writer, and was lucky enough to have a very supportive managing director at that time who saw something in me and kind of had to persuade me basically to be promoted 2 or 3 times, because I saw myself as a creative. I didn't think that I could progress in the way that she was a woman, she saw in me. So but not everybody kind of has that person who will kind of bring your potential out of you, so you need to represent that for yourself. And I think what that also shows, that story, is that actually the best talent in your team isn't always screaming, look at me, promote me, sitting on top of a neon unicorn. It can be in a corner, very quietly and modestly knocking it out the park day after day after day, and perhaps letting that unicorn, to extend that weird metaphor that I've just stumbled into, take the credit. So you need to, as a leader, not just pay attention to the loudest voices. You need to seek out that talent and help them to reach their full potential, even if they don't see it in themselves. And again, empathy and leadership is what creates that culture where every single person is noticed and rewarded for their value. However, that isn't happening everywhere, and it probably won't ever happen anywhere. So it's to a degree on us women to kind of throw ourselves at these big moments that Buffy speaks about, even if you're scared of them, because that's where growth comes from. Those are the moments that develop you and really make you who you are. Daenerys from Game of Thrones. So this one, she says, it seems to me that a queen who trusts no one is as foolish as a queen who trusts everyone. And I think this is about, how you are perceived and how you perceive other people. So, teamwork is obviously more important than the actions of one individual. And I think, again, something that is very important is being okay about asking for support, ask for help in your career, look at your network, and again, show your vulnerability. Particularly, obviously, at the moment, a lot of us in this industry will be struggling. They're things are happening that are beyond our control. Make sure that you make that clear what you need, and tell people, because I think that's really important. Again, be vulnerable. There's a book called The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer, which is a really good reference for that. But also you need to be canny in your career. So there's this kind of rhetoric out there that there's a kind of really supportive sisterhood, that women always support other women, and that's not actually always true. Sometimes women, female leaders can be counterproductive to bringing other women on. That doesn't always happen, and when it doesn't happen, you can feel quite lonely. So I think it's really important to align yourselves with people who celebrate you, who make you feel good, who bring out the best in you, who build you up and not knock you down. And if you do work for somebody who is knocking you down and making you feel crap about yourself, then, you know, be brave enough to understand it's not about you, and to you know, take yourself elsewhere and find the people who do know you and who you can trust. And again, don't compare yourself to other people. I think women in particular are terrible for that. They look at other people's success and they measure themselves against that, and that is, again, so limiting in terms of what you can become. Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City. I have been rewatching all of Sex and the City from season 1 because my agency does a lot of work in New York, and I'm not able to travel to New York at the moment, so it's kind of as close as I'm getting. So Carrie Bradshaw, who's one of my all-time favourite TV characters, actually, says, maybe the past is like an anchor holding us back. Maybe you have to let go of who you were to become who you will be. Which reminds me of another big hero of mine who isn't a woman, Bruce Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen said that you shouldn't let the person you once were drive the car, that they'll always be in the car with you. They'll maybe be shouting at you from the back seat, but you shouldn't let them drive, which I think is lovely. And I think I personally have gone through many different iterations of who I thought I fundamentally was and who I let drive my car. So yeah, as I explained, first I was a writer and a creative, and I thought that was all of me. I thought that's how my brain worked. I thought that was where I added value. And when I was persuaded by my then boss to take an account director role, I tried very hard to talk her out of that. And say I couldn't do finances. You know, I wasn't commercially minded. I was a creative person. I was potentially a strategist, but really I was a writer. And then when she did persuade me, I found actually that I could be creative and be good at finances. And I had this inherent commercial instinct that I didn't know I had, and that I otherwise probably would never explored, and I would never have built out as a strength of mine if I hadn't had someone who had that faith in me. So please don't define yourself in narrow terms, because other people are lazy and they will just accept that as all of you, and you'll hold yourself back, and then you might miss out on those hugely challenging but very rewarding experiences that do unlock capabilities in you that you otherwise don't know you have. You know, everyone talks about this imposter syndrome, and that is definitely a thing. So do try and let that go, and let those different versions of you take the driver's seat. Alicia Florrick, she is from a brilliant TV series called The Good Wife. So if you've not seen that, check that out. And I have this thing where when I am presenting or I'm going into a business meeting, I try and embody Alicia Florrick. She's a lawyer, and she just has this incredible kind of pragmatism and confidence, but again, vulnerability. So she's a really well-rounded character. So she says, I've decided life's too short not to be honest. Now, I've got mixed feelings about this. I hate when people say, you know, I like to tell it like it is, because actually I think that's a bit sociopathic, and we can't all go around tipping tables over and you know, demanding things go our way all the time. But also it's about, you know, leadership shouldn't be a dictatorship. So I think the best agencies are those where the wider team can make a change and take ownership of that change, importantly. So take on practical actions to support their leadership team in bringing initiatives to fruition. So I think, you know, in the context of wanting to kind of change agency culture, I think if you see something happening in your agency, or if you're a client and in a marketing team, if you see something happening that you don't like, you should be able to speak up about that to your boss, to your CEO, with a plan for how you intend to support them in addressing it. And if you feel there is not a path for you to do that, or your boss kind of turns you away from their door when you go with that plan, then I suggest you go to a new place of work, because that's not somewhere where you can thrive. So this is my last flea bag. So I won't swear, but being proper and sweet and nice and pleasing is a nightmare. It's exhausting, and I just feel like all of this. So yes, we need to be kind, we need to be empathetic and vulnerable to play as a team. But I have learned as I get older and I gain more experience in this industry, that you should never hide who you are. You should never compromise your true personality, because Fleabag's right, it's exhausting and it takes up so much of your energy trying to be what other people think you should be, or your perception of what they think you should be. Every aspect of you is right, nothing is wrong. So do learn to trust your instincts and be okay with making mistakes and getting it wrong. If you do get it wrong, and my God, I have got it wrong, it's okay. Again, be okay with being vulnerable. Apologize. Say I'm sorry, I was wrong, and move on. And I think that's what earns you respect, not just this gung-ho, bullish, my way or the highway approach. And then if you do get it wrong, trying to kind of cover that up. People will respect you for being vulnerable. People will expect you for taking ownership of your mistakes. And then they'll feel they can make mistakes too. And then you have a better creative agency. I think, it's a cliche and it's perhaps a sweeping generalization, but I do think that women are terrible at being self-critical. They question their instincts. They try and fit some kind of mold they perceive as being the right mold, perhaps suppress aspects of their personality, such as, emotion. And I doubt many men sit of an evening replaying conversations in their minds and wishing things had gone a different way. And I've met a lot of female leaders actually who have obviously at some point read a book or decided they need to be a certain way in order to be respected and to be a leader. And I just think that's bullshit, actually. You need to be true to yourself. And like Fleabag, if that's being a bit wild and messy, then be wild and messy. Be unapologetic about who you are. Focus on your strengths, obviously. But yeah, don't compromise yourself for anyone, would be my advice. So one last slide. This is my good friend and business partner, Fleabag. Sorry, Sven Clouston. So this is my strategy director, because I wanted to make the point that it's not just about women, and supportive men are crucial in championing female success and modelling empathetic leadership. And my agency is co-founded 50% male and female, and obviously Sven is very comfortable in his masculinity, and we both love Fleabag, so came to my Halloween party last year dressed like this. Just thought I would share that, because he tends to try and ask me difficult questions when I do these webinars, so I thought I'd sabotage him for a change. So do get in touch if you want to have a dialogue on anything I've spoken about. That's my email address there. Do follow myself and Rationale, our agency page on LinkedIn. For other content, Sven and I do a podcast called Have You Ever, which isn't about marketing, it's just about sharing wonderful things, and we're doing a kind of lockdown special at the moment, just kind of advising on things like TV programs that we are enjoying, that are making us happy while we deal with this lockdown situation. So that's me. Thank you very much. We'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Rowan. Some questions to put to you, if you don't mind.
Okay, no, absolutely.
What do you think are the main reasons behind why there's so few female founders? Could it be a confidence issue, or perhaps women facing more challenges or having their motives scrutinized more, or something else?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said, I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a combination of women holding themselves back and being held back. So I think their agency culture, as I say, particularly in London, is pretty cutthroat and pretty hard. The hours are very long, so obviously, women tend to be in parenting more than men, so that's difficult to sustain if you have children. And I think that's definitely a thing, and it definitely needs to change. I also think, just in my experience as a manager, it is a thing that women tend, and I've done this myself, women don't tend to put themselves forward in the same way for promotions. And again, when you're in an industry that rewards bullishness and, confidence and extroversion, that can mean sometimes that women are more likely to be overlooked than men, because men are better at pushing for things. I mean, there's a study that's been done that I find really interesting around, job descriptions and actually applying for jobs, that women will scan the skills required, and if they don't have one or two, they'll go, actually, I better not apply because this isn't for me. Men will apply anyway. So there's a whole, there's societal, systemic stuff at play. There's hiring practice bias, where if you obviously have a man in leadership and he wants to hire someone for his leadership team, he's much more likely to hire a man or somebody like him. So there definitely needs to be a kind of proactive change where people actually acknowledge it and start to force that to be different. But yeah, I think there's hundreds of things at play, and it is getting better. It's not getting better fast enough, but people are starting to talk about it more, which is great.
Excellent. The next question is from Lauren. Do you think this culture is, and a kind of a follow-on really, do you think this culture is why so many women end up going freelance or setting up on their own?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So, I left my previous agency for various reasons, but we had a parent company that all the leadership team were basically men. And I felt that it wasn't even so much about me being a woman, it was more about diversity, wasn't encouraged. I think taking control of your own destiny is a very powerful thing, actually. But it's interesting that, women do go freelance, but only 1% of agencies are female founded. And again, as an entrepreneur, I have children who are through there playing Xbox while I talk to you all. It's hard. It's a hard shift, and you do have to make compromises. Men and women have to make compromises, but yeah, I think that's absolutely why that happens. Which again, obviously, if people are en masse leaving agencies to set up freelance, that will be why you see less women in those agencies.
Next question is from Frankie. Men seem to be more comfortable peacocking and glory hunting. Do you have any do you have any tips on how to show your value without peacocking? A very broad stereotype, obviously not true in all cases. That's what Frankie.
Yeah, well, I know many men who don't peacock, actually. So I should say that I know lots of lovely men, although I have met some peacockers in my time. Yeah, I think, this is so hard, and it's like I say, in my presentation, what you need in that situation is an empathetic boss who will go, right, okay, this person's screaming at me, how great they are, and that person over there is actually doing a brilliant job, but I've hardly spoken to them. And that needs effort. You need to really, search that out. I've done it for other people. I'm proud to say, and it was definitely done for me. I literally tried to talk myself out of promotions, which now when I look back, I just could slap myself. So yeah, you need that, but you won't always get that. So you can put yourself forward. If you're not, this is not to do with male, female at all. This is to do with personality. But if you struggle to vocally put that forward, then email your boss, say to them what your worth is, show them, what you've achieved. And I think that is something that actually agencies are good at. They're good at rewarding talent, I think, if they see it. So yeah, I think if you're in a situation like that where you find it difficult to find a path, then capture what you have achieved in your role, over deliver on the role that you're in now, and make sure that your boss hears about that, whether that's in person in a meeting, or through through a stakeholder that you feel you can talk to, or send them an email. I would say, but be brave. Yeah.
Just got a couple of questions more, if you don't mind, Rowan.
Sure.
I've got a question from Rachel, which is, how do you think we can truly get men on board with this, getting them to truly care, speak up, take action? And secondly, how can we go beyond shining a light on women and making sure we include women of colour in a discussion?
Yeah, No, I think that's really, really important, actually. And I think men, you know, I really hate the kind of, if I'm honest with you, the kind of male-female rhetoric, because I think, you know, you have good men, good men, you know, bad women, in terms of, I've had women hold me back as much as I have had men hold me back. So I think, yeah, it's to do with benefit, isn't it, with anyone? It's so I think if men see a benefit from diversity, so if you have a, you know, and I think again that is being acknowledged now, there's studies being done, there's statistics out there that show a diverse workforce is a more successful workforce. Businesses that put diversity at their core achieve better, they outperform their peers, and that's across all industries. So I think it's that benefit analysis, and again, finding champions in your team who are, you know, aligned with that. What I would really hate to see is, you know, in agencies that do decide to do something proactively, that they don't include men in that dialogue. So if you start to kind of look at diversity in your agency, don't just make that, you know, BME and women, include a diverse point of view, and men should be part of that, and actually difficult men should be part of that, so that they can be part of that dialogue, feel heard, buy into what you're trying to achieve, and yet ultimately see the benefits of it. Yeah.
From Amy, do you think COVID will help with flexible working for women, in that it's shown that we don't have to be in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5?
Yeah, see, I've been thinking about that a lot, actually, and how what's happening now is impacting creativity, because I think creativity is about collaboration and brainstorms and teamwork, and I think it isn't conducive to that, actually. And I think there's always going to be a need for, you know, people to be working together. That said, you know, I work from home at the moment because our agency is small, and yeah, I think there will be some change. I think probably the change that if I'm honest with you, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think a lot of the change that we think is going to be enduring might not be. I think people have short memories. I think when we get on the other side of this, I think things will seem to change for a while, and then I think we'll probably, you know, we'll achieve some change, but I think maybe not as profound as people are suggesting. Because I think we'll move on, and I think in a degree, you know, that's a good thing in many ways. I think now, though, employers will struggle to say that this can't happen, is if they, you know, have not seen any negative impact from people working from home, then if you'll have a better case now to make that, if that's fundamental to how you need to work, then and you can show that you can still do your job, that they won't have a leg to stand on now. So yeah, I think that's a good thing, and I think that will change. But yeah, I think we're going to see a combination of things happening once the pandemic's over, that, you know, we'll keep a little bit of the good stuff that's happening now, but I think, you know, it might not be as fundamental as some people believe. But that's my opinion.
Again, thank you so much for that, Rowan. Thank you for all the questions. There are a few more, but I'm obviously conscious of everyone's time, and I know that we've obviously got the next session starting at 11. If there are anybody who has got questions, then obviously Rowan's LinkedIn and email address will be available. If you can't find them, drop me an email and it will be sent to you. So yeah, thank you so much, Rowan. Thank you so much, Nicola.
Thanks all of you, and yeah, do please reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have a chat about anything. So now I just have to work out how I get out of this tweet. You and me both,
Rowan. So I'm going to say goodbye, and I'll see you after the commercial break in about 5 minutes.